Thanks for joining us at the Business Growth Café, where each week we select from a menu of topics for a focused discussion with an industry expert to provide insights that can impact your business's growth. With your host, Angelo Ponzi.
I am Angelo Ponzi, your host here at the Business Growth Café, and thank you for joining us. Whether you're an avid listener to the show or frankly you're here for the first time, the concept of the Business Growth Cafe is business advice, right? To give you guidance on how to grow your business and be successful. Now, we talk about business growth all the time on the show, and we recognize it's easy to say grow your business, but not easy to actually do it. There are so many factors, bumps in the road, obstacles that you'll face not only in the early stages of your business, but as your business continues to grow. You need to be committed, passionate, unrelenting, persistent in your pursuit to build your business. Or another way of putting it is being undaunted in overcoming personal doubts and doubters, the naysayers, the challengers, and the myriad of other external and internal pressures that you will feel in growing your business. To survive and thrive, you need to be undaunted in your commitment to your success. So joining me at the cafe today is Kara Goldin, founder and CEO of Hint Water. In her new book, Undaunted, Kara discusses her path that led her to the creation of Hint and their journey to grow their business. Kara has earned so many different awards: Fortune's Most Powerful Woman, Entrepreneurs, Ernst & Young Entrepreneurial Winning Women, Gold Stevie Award winner for Female Entrepreneur of the Year, Forbes 40 Women to Watch Over 40, and EY Entrepreneur of the Year, Northern California. Again, so many. So stay tuned. Grab yourself a Hint Water as we explore the ups and downs of growing Hint Water into a successful business in a very competitive market, and how the lessons learned can help your pursuit in being undaunted and growing your business.
Your strategic plans are essential to managing your business's growth. Spend the time to develop a cohesive roadmap to follow to ensure your entire team is moving in the right direction. These plans should take the insights and the brand strategy work you've already completed to help you achieve your long-term business and growth objectives, as well as keep you competitive. These are actionable plans and should include the details of achieving your growth, including tactical implementations, timelines, budgets, and KPIs for success. Developing your plan is a team sport. Make sure you include the stakeholders from each of your strategic departments in your organization, because everybody in the company is impacted by the success or failure of your plans. The following are 6 key questions to ask yourself. Do you have a clear understanding about what you're trying to achieve? Number 2, what does your brand stand for in the eyes of your customers? 3, why do your customers buy from you? 4, what are your competitors doing? And 5, what is your approach to sales? Where are your opportunities for revenue coming from? And number 6, how can you differentiate yourself from your competition? Visit theponzigroup.com to learn more.
Well, Kara, welcome to the Business Growth Cafe.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I really appreciate you carving a little time out of your busy schedule. I loved reading your book, and we're going to explore your book. And obviously, we could probably talk for a week about the actual path you're going to condense down to many years. So there are some key things that I want to kind of dig into. There's some really things that resonated with me throughout your book as an entrepreneur myself. So I do want to kind of take us on a journey. But kind of to get things going, obviously you are the CEO and founder of Hint Water, the number one unsweetened flavored water on the market. So congratulations on that, because you are in an incredibly competitive space, not only today, but as you were building your brand. And so, just seeing how you positioned and niched, and the perseverance and being undaunted, as your book title, and I love that, by the way. And how you were able to really grow that. So why don't we kind of go back a little bit, because you didn't grow up in the beverage industry. You kind of grew up in media and tech. So why don't we kind of start the journey there, maybe up to the ta-da of Hint Water.
Yeah. So I well, thank you, first of all, for the introduction. And it is a very challenging industry that I didn't know much about, other than the fact that I was a consumer of beverages, of diet soda in particular. And I started my career in media and journalism. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to work for Fortune magazine. That was my dream. And although that didn't really happen, it did land me in New York at Time magazine. I went from there to what I think would be termed today as a late stage startup called CNN. And Ted Turner was still running around the office. And, we were building the impossible. He had a vision for 24-hour news that was, so many people said, who needs it? I mean, I can't, what's wrong with 6 and 10 o'clock news?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So it was those kind of moments, I think, of working for people like that I didn't have a full appreciation for until much later.
Mm-hmm.
I moved to Silicon Valley and with my soon-to-be husband, and ended up working for a startup that was a spin out of Apple that was doing CD-ROM shopping. That was a little known, little discussed Steve Jobs concept that was taking images and putting them on a disk rather than waiting for baud modem speeds. Dial-up was still pretty archaic, and we were fighting with our siblings about not getting on the phone while they were on AOL chat rooms, because you'd get cut off, if for those of you who might remember those days. And America Online was one of our investors. They acquired us. So I went through my first acquisition in the mid 90s. And that's when I was asked to run this business called e-commerce and shopping, and was handling all the partnerships for America Online. So going out to retailers like J. Crew and LL Bean. I had the best job in the world. I mean, who wouldn't want to be dealing with retailers and shoppers? And that was my world. And it was, finally $1 billion in business, which I look back on too as nobody ever really thought that e-commerce and people would shop this way, in the way that certainly they do today.
Mm-hmm.
And when I decided it was $1 billion in revenue and it was time to leave, it was my primary purpose was to spend more time with my family, which was not a very popular decision to many people. I certainly had my own doubts whether or not I was doing the right thing, but I really didn't want to know the United Airlines pilots better than my own family. And
crazy.
So I was looking to kind of stay in the Bay and not travel as much while I had 3 kids under the age of 4. And it was during that time when I think I really started to focus on what I was putting into my kids' bodies, and kind of recognizing things that I had never really paid attention to, not just what they were eating and what I was buying for them, but also types of products that I was putting on their skin. All of that was kind of going on. And then I finally decided I should really pay attention to all of that for myself, because in order to be the best parent, I have to practice what I preach. And it's not just about giving it to my family, but also giving it to myself. And I had gained a bunch of weight over the course of my pregnancies, and was terrible at losing the weight that I gained, but also had developed terrible adult acne, which really bothered me because I had never even had acne as a kid. And now as an adult, I did. And so I was trying to get healthy and figure out exactly how I, solve these problems while I didn't have a job. After I'd given up on sort of solving these problems through creams and food, that's when I started one day, purely by accident, looking at my drink, my diet soda, my Diet Coke in particular, and saw all of these ingredients that I was putting into my body, not really thinking that it was probably a problem, because it was called diet, right? And that was the key thing that I later learned, that these healthy perception products like diet soda versus healthy reality were all over my life. And I just decided to test, kind of concerned that I wasn't really sure what I was putting into my body. But it was when I did this test and saw the results, that's when I realized that I had been fooled and marketed to for many years. I had been drinking diet soda since I was 15 years old. I was an early adopter when Diet Coke came out. And when I gave up the diet soda, that's when 2.5 weeks later, I lost over 20 pounds. My skin cleared up. And what had seemed impossible to me was all of a sudden so easy. And I couldn't figure out why no one else knew about this. And it was this epiphany that had kind of happened in my own home, that I thought, if I could just take a product like I had been making in my kitchen at this point in order to get myself to stay on this path of just drinking water by slicing up fruit and throwing it in the water, then I could help a lot of other people who are spending billions of dollars on diet drinks, on diets overall, just by helping them enjoy water. Maybe that's not all they have to do, but as a first step. And so I thought, maybe while I don't have a job, maybe I should take this product to Whole Foods. How hard could it be to get a product on the market? And I explain all of this because I never really thought about it as, okay, I'm going to go start my own company. I'm going to do better than vitamin water out there. I'm going to take on big soda. For me, it was very personal because I had solved this problem for myself in my own life. And I felt like I had come across something that other people should know about. And that was the beginning.
It's interesting. There's so many stories of people that kind of did something for themselves or baked the cookies and then turned it into a business. So I really appreciate that. I have a friend of mine who has a brownie business, and the recipe's 100 years old. It's been handed down for generations. And she is the only one out of the generations and her sisters that ever decided to actually turn it into a business. And so I certainly can appreciate that evolution. I was also a Diet Coke junkie. That was kind of my go-to product. I kind of got off soda about 10 or 12 years ago, just to the pure nature. I reflected back one day as a child dumping Coca-Cola on my rusted bicycle chain. And I thought, if that could do that to my chain, what's it doing to my to my insides?
Interesting.
Yeah. So I've gone to water, and I've been a water drinker for a long time. And I think we tried Hint maybe earlier on, but never really adopted it. My wife likes the carbonated beverages, not soda, but water. And I don't. And so I just stick with pure water. So first of all, I want to thank you for reintroducing me to Hint, because now it is a mainstay. It is mine. And more importantly, I got my wife to basically get off I'll say the brand name, LaCroix, that she drinks all the time. And now, we've got more Hint in the fridge than we do anything else. So that's been a great discovery.
And did you try the Hint Fizz, by the way?
I have not.
She'll definitely like that. And it's a little harder to find. You can find it online on our website or on Amazon, but it's a little harder to find in stores because the space, that category, carbonated waters and fizzy waters, is just very, very crowded. You mentioned one of the brands, a big brand in that space, and it's just become a commodity product and is frankly kind of a race to the bottom with pricing for that category. It's there's no margin left in that business for any business. So it's sort of always has me stumped as to how certain players in that industry stay alive.
I'll have to definitely check that out, because that might solve and actually push LaCroix out of our fridge altogether. So thank you for that heads up. But I love the flavors. They've been fantastic. I did get I bought a couple single bottles at a store not too long ago, and one of them was lemon. And I had 2 bottles, and I told her one was mine, one was hers, and of course both were hers. And that was the end of that. So I haven't found it again, but I'm going to.
Lemon is really good. Lemon was actually a really tough flavor. So it took us a lot of people are surprised to hear that was one of the flavors that we wanted to do for a long time. Seems really simple, but it's it's one that, because we're using real fruit in the product. I mean, a lot of people know that lemons, turn into turpentine if you're, so it's it's a tough thing. You have to be very, very careful with using real fruit in order to actually not turn it in certain fruits. And that one is one in particular that was because we use the essences and we're using the rinds. It's while we make it simple for the consumer to understand, it's actually a very complicated product to make.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm going to jump ahead to another question because we're on the kind of the flavor profile. So how do you determine, now I'll say you, and maybe it's a team, but I got to believe it's you, determine what the flavor mix is going to be? And, how do you experiment with those? Obviously, I'm assuming you're not doing it in your kitchen anymore. So, how do you kind of go about doing that?
Well, it still does kind of incubate in the kitchen and start playing around with different things. I'm constantly, when I'm at, farmers markets or traveling over the last decade, I'll pick up fruits along the way. And I've always been a big fruit eater. So for me, it's just kind of experimenting. And what I found, though, is that over the years, people have asked me what flavors didn't work. And I think that I've tried things. For example, one of our flavors that we came out with was hibiscus. I grew up in Arizona. You know this from being in Southern California, where there's, huge Spanish, Latin America, population that is used to things that grow in, southern part of the U.S. and the Southwest. And so I grew up drinking hibiscus teas. My mom was a huge Sun Tea, if you remember Sun Tea maker. And so we came out with a hibiscus product. We had a honeydew hibiscus and also a hibiscus vanilla flavor. And they were amazing, but nobody understood them on the East Coast. And so you could clearly see, and I think it's an important point that when people buy products, particularly in the grocery store, unless they can actually taste it, they have a vision for what it's going to taste like. And so we found that our top flavors are blackberry and watermelon and cherry, the exact same top flavors that are in, the fruit section in a grocery store. And so while some may tell you they want unique and different, whether that's the consumer or the buyer that is actually, kind of your gatekeeper to getting on the shelf, the reality is that in order to have a broad base for a consumer, these kind of niche things like hibiscus, although they tasted yummy, would not be a top flavor until people could actually imagine it. So, but we, still incubate flavors. Our kids, who are now all 3 in university and 1 in high school, I mean, they'll tell us this is terrible. They're very honest about it. Oh, this is really good. So I think it's interesting. I think a lot about things that Steve Jobs said over the years. And one of the things that I think a lot about that he mentioned is don't ask your consumer what they want, show them what they want. And I think that that's what we've learned. One of the chapters in the book is something I say a lot: fly the airplane as we're building it. I always advise entrepreneurs to get your product to market the best you can and as cheap as you can, because you're going to learn a lot once the consumer has the power to buy your product or pick up your product, and without actually telling you, they'll show you exactly what they'll end up doing. And I think that that's a really key thing. I mean, there's large companies spend millions and millions of dollars doing all these focus groups. We don't do that. Even as we've grown into a much bigger company, we just get it out there and have consumers respond and we find that that's a much better, much more predictable mechanism for figuring out what the consumer will do.
So really looking at product moving. Actually, got research was one of my questions, because part of my background is research, and I've done a lot of consumer focus groups and a lot of other taste testing. And to your point, though, a lot of times especially when you're talking, if you don't understand how to read the groups, if there's 12 people, 24 people, basically telling you what they think, and then you're making strategic decisions off of 24 people. I tell my clients that's a bad thing. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to just use it for some fodder, some observational data, so we can make other decisions. And I love the fact that you're going to market and seeing how the product moves. And you said something else that I think was important in this, talking about the hibiscus, is understanding the cultural differences. I'll use that term, across the country. I worked in the alcoholic beverage industry for a long time, and the Jackson Family Group was one of my clients. We were doing this campaign development, and it was about coastal. And so we just went, hey, California, we'll go down and shoot some water and watch the ocean, and that'll be our coastal. At the last minute, we decided to actually go test coastal in the market across the country, and what we found is coastal didn't mean the same thing to somebody in Michigan and New York and Florida. And we realized the campaign would have bombed if we had just rolled it out the way we initially thought. So that was a kind of a learning lesson to understand the dynamics of the market. And I worked on another Simple Green, which is an all-purpose household cleaner. And we were down in Florida, and we were marketing to the Hispanic market, and we're telling them how to use it to clean their floors. Turned out to be, culturally, they didn't clean their floors that way, therefore our product didn't resonate. So I love the way you guys are doing. Yeah, it's consumer behavior and motivations is so important to really understand that, and getting the market read. That's why I love market tests. Get the product out there, see how it moves and things like that. So one of the questions I always ask my guests, and when you think about the continued growth of Hint, what keeps you up at night?
Well, first of all, I think the last 17 months for everybody has just been absolutely crazy. For Hint, we were always, in my mind, considered an essential product, but we are regulated by the FDA. And so I learned a whole new definition of essential product as an FDA essential product when the pandemic hit. When your country goes into pandemic status, it means a lot of different things, including the fact that your plants need to be running 24 hours a day. You need to use best practices to make sure that shelves are being stocked, and that you're supporting retail so that consumers can actually have water when they need it, all of those things. So it's not just toilet paper. I mean, there were products that are water that were also fell into that. And, it was at a time, I look at it as March 13th, when I woke up. We were closing our New York office. We have a San Francisco office and a New York office, and really realizing that our store shelves were out of stock, that people were hoarding products, our products and other products. And I knew that was kind of the beginning of we've got to put the pedal on full throttle and get moving and figure out what can we do. And it was definitely a time when we saw a piece of our business, an important piece of our business, to the tech community. Initially, we became the largest beverage in Silicon Valley to Google, Facebook, with all offices closing. We knew that business was going away. We didn't know how long it was going away for, but it was at that point that we decided that we had this channel beyond retail and beyond offices and food service that we could utilize, which was direct to consumer, which we had started back in 2012. And so we decided to really throw the gas on that. So over the last 17 months, that has tripled in size. And lots of other things that we had been focusing on, automating a lot of our production lines. When we're filling our product, we don't use preservatives in the product. And so we had been focusing on automating and getting people out of the room when we were doing the actual fill, for concern that if somebody, forget about somebody having COVID, but somebody sneezing on the line, if anything got in the bottle, we had been concerned. Nobody in the beverage industry was that concerned about it. We were, coming from a different industry. So our paranoia over the last 4 years actually became a huge benefit to us being able to keep our plants open 24 hours a day. And also the fact that we do everything in the US. So all of our production, all of our bottles are blown in the US. We don't, and I say that as an example, that that most cans come from China. So when the virus is on a different schedule, that many of the beverage industry, much of the beverage industry that produces their product in cans, actually had to forego producing their product for a period of time because there was a huge shortage because the plants were closed in China. So at that point, we ended up, in the beginning of 2020, the first half, we had already planned on going chain wide in Sam's Club, Walmart, and Aldi. And then we got a phone call from Costco to go chain wide in May of that year. Anyone in their right mind would tell you all 4 of those at the same time, you're crazy. Yeah, exactly. This is going to fail. But we did it. The team did it. We 100 of our people, members of our team, are salespeople that went out and serviced shelves with their N95 mask and their gloves and hand sanitizers. And we even came up with a new product, hand sanitizer, that we created using our essences to make hand sanitizer smell better. So we didn't stop innovating through the entire time. And like I said, our direct-to-consumer business really took off, but our overall business grew over 50% during this time. So I kept feeling like we were doing an incredible job of keeping up, and still believe we did an incredible job of keeping up. But I kept, kind of worrying, when is the shoe going to drop? When is this not going to? When are we really going to feel something? And I think we did an incredible job. I mean, through it. And even though we fought, losing pieces of business, I think a lot of the things that I talk about in the book, of having diversified different channels of revenue coming in, if one piece goes away, I share stories in the book that, can't put all your eggs in one basket. A lot of those challenges and lessons that were hard. What I saw during the pandemic was we were ready. And we were ready to continue figuring out how to move forward. Even I had turned my manuscript in for my book right before March 13th. And it was when I saw all of this craziness going on and trying to figure it out like everybody else, the first thing that I thought of was the 2008-2009 financial crisis. Yep. And how challenging it was for us as a company, and obviously as an individual too. But the key problem that our company had was that we didn't have enough money in the bank. And so we almost went under. We risked a lot personally in order to kind of get through that time. And so the first thing that I did, as I was making sure my team was safe with all the N95 masks and everything else, and joined them and going out to stores, was reaching out to raise capital, because we knew we had all these unique opportunities with Costco, and but we didn't have enough money. And so it was, we had to figure out a way. And I remember saying to my CFO, we need to go raise money. And he kind of joked with me and said, do you realize all offices are closed? We're on Zoom now. There's no way you guys are going to be able to raise money. And I said, we have to. We have to view Zoom as a tool. We cannot view it as something that's going to stop us. And we have to figure out what we can do. And so I feel like there were a lot of challenges that led up to this period of time for us as a company and me personally that really were challenges when I was going through them, but really prepared me to push through. And by the way, we did close around within 60 days and moved very quickly. Many of the people that we went out to thought we were crazy, that we were, but again, we had set the business up right. We were doing the right things and we were being proactive about what we thought we needed.
Well, I mean, in your book, you talk about there's kind of several times when you went out for funding, and you referenced the recession, and I think during that time that certainly was challenging. You think you lost Starbucks at the time, and then one door closed, the other one opened, and then Amazon came in, and there's that evolution to that next level. But you guys did something that I found really right on brand, Undaunted, is you got to a point where you went out and agreed with a strategic venture capitalist, whatever you wanted to call them, where you kind of risked it all. We're going to gamble. We're so convinced I said we already. You are so convinced that you were going to make it happen that you and your family really risked the next 10 years to pull it off. And so that just was incredible to me. A lot of people might have said, yeah, you know what? We're comfortable. We got some money in the bank. I don't know. Maybe this thing hasn't quite gone the way we want. But it's that perseverance and that push and the constant learning and evolving that I found in your book just exciting. And then here you were again. We come out of the recession, and now boom, there's a pandemic, and same kind of thing. Opportunities creates a need, and you guys solved it. And Zoom is a tool, not an obstacle.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely right. And again, at the time, I mean, I remember when I was sharing my book with a few people, getting quotes from them. One of our investors is John Legend, and I gave him a pre-copy of the book, and he read the book, and he said, I kept thinking as I was turning the pages that this is where the company shuts down. And then I remembered I'm an investor, and I think I would know if it shut down. And he said, this is incredible. One of the stories that he remembered was that as well, because I think there's times that you go through these periods, and even members of your family might not even know and what you're going through, right? And because it's too complicated to explain why you would do something. Maybe you have a little bit of your own doubts. Are you doing the right thing? And then, so many people will weigh in and say, that's really stupid. That's not the right thing. But it was really this conviction and belief that we were doing the right thing. And I was just sharing the story with somebody who hadn't read my book, an entrepreneur that was asking for my advice on closing some money, and had kind of it was different, but it was similar. And I'm a huge believer that just because somebody's never done something a certain way, it doesn't mean you can't ask and get creative. And if you really believe in something and you still feel really uncomfortable about it, maybe you lay it out that, I'll do this. I'm not thrilled with it, but what I'd like to arrange is this. And what's the worst that can happen? They could say no, right? And that is it's a life, right? It's a life lesson. And, and I think it really is something that resonates with people. Maybe they will never go raise money, but they look at that story as one where, maybe they think for a moment that I'm this huge risk taker, or that I never had any fears, or I was scared, I was scared that it might not all work out, that was, a bad decision. But I also believed that I had put myself into a position where, I didn't really have a choice. And that's
Mhm.
the bigger lesson there, is that when you do that, then you run out of choices, and then you feel like you're up against the wall, and maybe the other side will actually go along with what you're suggesting, but maybe they won't. And I think that is a lesson that, we can all learn from, no matter how many years we've been in business or how old we are, whether we're starting our career or whatever. It's just, you ask for things that you want. The worst that can happen is that somebody says no. And don't get yourself, if you can help it, into positions where you don't have options, because
Well,
that is not a good situation.
yeah, and I think that was something else that you talked about is having those options. So we talked about a little bit of all the eggs in one basket, and I probably about 60% of my career was in the advertising business, and we were in tech at points in time, and when tech tanked, the agency tanked. So we started learning, okay, don't do that, and we diversified. And and I took these as kind of lessons, and I had 4 lessons. I can't remember if you actually meant them to be 4 lessons, but I wrote them down as 4 lessons. And maybe we can just talk about them a little bit, because
Yeah.
you already just did it. So one was stay on good terms. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're talking about. I mean, frankly, don't tick people off that you might need later on, right? There's no reason to. The other one you said was don't take it personally. It's only business, and in which I truly believe in. During my days of going out knocking on doors, I still do that. I used to be like, oh my God, they rejected me. And then somebody said to me one day, well, it's not you, kid. It's just
True.
business.
Very true.
Never put your eggs all in one basket. And the one you were just talking about, if you don't create a network of options, opportunities, potential partners, and employees, you're putting your company at risk. And I thought those were 4 great lessons for my listeners, frankly, that they should, think about, and maybe you want to expound upon some of those.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that the first one that you mentioned, just about, do your best to kind of walk out the door with your head held high. It was interesting. I just had a post recently about this, and it was interesting because the audience, it was on TikTok actually, and I have a very young audience on TikTok who are just kind of starting out, and they're really interested in entrepreneurism. And I was mentioning that, if the role that you're in, the job that you're in, you decide that it's not what you want to be doing for whatever reason, do your best to actually close the loop, right? And not just for your boss, right? Not just for whatever the person running the company, but that your colleagues are going to see that, and your colleagues are going to be the ones that are going to remember you when maybe they hear about a job, right? And they hear how hard you tried, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, and they're also going to cover you when there's extra work and they're still there. And so it was a really interesting dialogue, because most people are like, they never cared about me or whatever. I'm like, all of that is probably true, but it doesn't matter, because your colleagues and how you actually walk out the door is the most important thing. Now, if somebody
Mm-hmm.
asks you, instead of staying 2 weeks, they ask you to stay for a month, then you can't, because maybe the next job that you're going to will go away or whatever. You're expected to do certain things like stay 2 weeks, but nothing more than that. And so lessons like that, I think, are just, you do your best. It doesn't always work out, but you really do your best to kind of leave with your head held high. And the same, to your point, with working with, other partners. It's you never know where people are going to land, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that, while the story of Starbucks, I certainly understood that they were making a decision to remove us from the case because they wanted to make room for higher margin business, sandwiches, that they could have a higher ring and higher margins. All made total logical sense. And it was great for them. It was terrible for me. I had all this inventory in my warehouse. I didn't know how I was going to go back and deal with not only the inventory that was going to go bad, but my investors, and how I would share that millions of dollars of business was going away in 2 weeks. It wasn't fair. I had every right to go and, tell the people off at Starbucks, but instead I quietly hung up the phone, and I was not happy, but I also felt like, I have a choice. I can sit there and, be really angry. And then when I absorbed it all, what I realized is I was most angry with myself, because I cared about this account so much because I didn't have another, and I didn't have options. And so the story of don't put all your eggs in one basket, I think it's celebrate your wins, but then always have lots of options, because you never know what will happen. And when you're not privy to strategy on the other side, or how well financially they're doing, maybe they go out of business, you don't want to be the last one standing in that situation, and really holding on to nothing in the end. Yeah. So the third one you mentioned, just so I.
Oh, third one. So it was stay on good terms. Don't take it personally. Never put all your eggs in one basket, and don't create a network of options. Or if you don't create a network of options, opportunities, potential partners, or employees, you're putting your company at risk.
Yeah. The one about, I have multiple stories about this topic in particular, but the don't take it personally. I think, when I had never raised money for a company before. I had, been at companies where it was someone else's role. I wasn't the CEO, or, I wasn't the CFO, so I wasn't raising money. So I didn't really understand. I felt like as a tech executive, when people were calling me from tech and saying, hey, I hear you're starting a beverage company. We have a pool of money, a fund that we're going to, that we deploy. Maybe you want to come in, and, they want to have meetings, which entrepreneurs, time is your most valuable thing, right? Exactly, and so not really understanding the sort of goals of that fund. If somebody wants to, if they're investing, if they've only ever invested in fintech, for example, they're probably not going to invest in a beverage company. So I'm not saying don't have the meetings, but if you're really time constrained and know that your odds are really low, that they're ultimately going to invest. And again, when a few of those people in Silicon Valley, Sand Hill Road, were saying no to me, I thought that, my baby was ugly, right? That they didn't like it. They didn't really understand it. They were worried about, well, if this is really such a great idea, then what will happen when Coke comes out with their product to go and compete against you? Which, by the way, I was never really worried about that. I was a little worried about it for a moment, but what I figured out, and what I've learned along the way too, is that the large guys that focus on other things are not really the people that you have to worry about. Those are the people that are not as innovative and aren't as crazy as you are to go and start an entirely new category.
Well, more importantly, they hadn't identified that category as viable. And your conversations in the book with the Coca-Cola people were interesting.
Yeah.
I've dealt with some larger organizations throughout my career, and again, through my advertising days, I got to work with some very big global companies, and it's very interesting as when you're talking to some of the developers versus the marketing people versus the C-suite people, and the attitudes they have about competitive products and in market niches and things like that. And normally I'm there as a strategic planner. I'm a fractional CMO these days. And so I look at things a little bit differently than maybe they do, because they're not necessarily out in the trenches and kind of seeing how things are going. So it's always interesting.
Well, and I think you've seen this obviously a lot in your roles, where I think that the challenge with companies when you're in the $1 billion, you're in the large public companies, is as long as things are working, you just continue doing the same thing. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the, my father had actually been, I call him a frustrated entrepreneur, working for a large company called ConAgra. And he had developed a product actually inside of Armor Company, which was acquired by ConAgra, called Healthy Choice. And, I used to hear his frustrations of dealing with, here he is innovating, and his whole purpose of starting that product was because he thought that Stouffer's TV dinners were terrible. And my mom had gone back to work, and he wanted to start a healthier and better tasting product that he actually understood what it was, versus, as he said,
Mm-hmm.
mystery meat, in the original TV dinners of the 70s. And so I think that innovation is just something that I think most really smart, large company people would say that they're just not really good at innovating and going in and starting not only new companies, but also new categories, which is what we did at Hint.
Right. A lot of times I think they just throw money at it and thinking they're just going to bully their way there, and doesn't always work out that way. One of the things you mentioned in 2012 and really currently moving really more direct to consumer. And I'm not sure you mentioned this in your kind of opening, but I called it you had a strategic advantage over a lot of the other folks out there, as you actually came from that kind of e-commerce. I think you did mention it briefly, but you really kind of cut your teeth in a sense on the e-commerce world, and so that's something you were very comfortable with, and probably easier to roll out at Hint than maybe other people were thinking about.
Yeah, I definitely had exposure to it. I think that the key thing, I had never launched my own store, though. I had seen other people launch their stores,
Mm-hmm.
and I sat patiently watching the struggles of many big brands. The Gap is one in particular that was very confident initially about being able to deliver, individual packages to people. But remember, the Gap still, to this day, they don't have a catalog. They have a direct to consumer business, but the early adopters and the people who had it easiest in being able to do direct to consumer were the ones that were used to shipping individual packages to people. So companies like LL Bean had been doing it for years. And so it was very easy for them to jump into direct to consumer. But others, maybe even others that seemed bigger, that were on every corner, were really challenged by how did they do it, and how, they didn't have a customer service center. They didn't have a pick and pack operation. They did large trucks to these stores, but it's a very, very different model. So
Mm-hmm.
I think what I learned was, because I was really in there in the beginning watching their challenges, is that you can learn through challenges. They don't have to be your own challenges. You learn through other people's challenges, but still it was scary when it was going to be my own, that here we were starting. But I think that the other thing, that thinking back on my career, is even though I was in some cases not working directly, but maybe, very indirectly, significantly, multiple levels down from them, but somebody like Ted Turner being a visionary, and while everybody else is saying he's crazy about a 24-hour news channel, he put stakes in the ground around that idea and started showing people why they needed it. And then there were leaders of countries who actually learned that their country was going to war by watching CNN.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what put them on the map. But also just being, I was always curious, but somewhat obsessed with these people that seemed a little crazy and had this vision, but actually were creating services and products that people loved. Not a lot of people initially, but they were building audiences. And so watching that and knowing, little things along the way, like, you be very clear about your mission, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't sway, and you have to hire people that believe in your mission and people that are better than you at certain tasks, not saying that you don't understand what those functions are. As I say on many talks that I give on college campuses, that, in order to run a company, you can't just be an engineer. You can't just be a good marketer.
Right.
You actually have to understand how to build a business plan and have respect for the finance and have respect for the marketing and the engineering and all of those things. But again, kind of living, that was my journey. I didn't know I was on that journey, but huge, great preparation for being able to know that I can do it. I can knock walls down. I can do what others think is impossible. I can start a new company, a new category, but I have to be patient. I have to get the consumer to catch up to where I'm at. I have to take steps along the way that allow me to get a little bit further, that I have to keep chiseling at the rock and continue to make progress, and frankly celebrate that progress, especially when things seem really, really hard and down, which they do at certain days. And it's also another reason why I really wanted this book to get out there, because I think there's this idea that being an entrepreneur is you're the unicorn or you're the failure. There's so many things that happen in between that can really affect the outcome. A pandemic can happen, and how prepared you were, how much you are willing to ask questions, learn from your mistakes, not make the same mistake twice. All of those things I think need to be told over and over to people. And not just people who are wanting to be entrepreneurs or who are entrepreneurs. The number of parents I've spoken to who have shared with me that they've gotten a clearer idea about what their kids are going through through this time, because it's a lot. I mean, it really it takes a toll on people to go to be an entrepreneur, and especially when people think what you're doing is not right in some way or a little off.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a couple of things I think that were important, and that's talking about, understanding the different roles. And when I consult with my clients, one of the things I say is everybody in the organization needs to understand the brand, needs to be able to communicate it on a second's notice. But more importantly, they need to understand that they're not isolated in their jobs, that everybody is intertwined. If marketing and sales do a great job, well, then manufacturing is going to have to produce, inventory is going to make sure they're stocked. The delivery folks are going to have to make sure. Everybody, there's a cause and effect. And if they don't understand their piece of the puzzle, then they're missing it, right? They're just doing a function, and they don't understand the cause and effect. And so I think that was really an important thing that you said is people start to grow their businesses, and it gets beyond you doing it all yourself, right? Now you've got team, and the team has to understand the vision, and they have to understand what they're trying to accomplish or what the goal of the company is. And then again, how they make that happen, I think is really important. At one point in time, Hint was a product. Now Hint's a brand. When did that transformation happen, do you think?
I think over time it's been growing. I think for me personally, when we only a few years ago, we already had our direct to consumer business in place, and I had a scare with skin cancer. And I had basal cell skin cancer on my nose. Being a redhead, way too much sun over the years. It was my time, and that's when I had a conversation with myself around why I didn't wear sunscreen. And I definitely wore it at the beach. I typically didn't wear it on my face. I trusted SPF in makeup and thought that was good enough. And then when this occurred, that's when I said, gosh, I need to start wearing sunscreen. I looked, first of all, for a sunscreen that I really enjoyed the experience. Something that I've learned in developing my own product is that it's something that the bottle, the feel of it, the taste, the smell, everything. It's one thing to be able to get trial. It's another thing to be able to get the consumer to buy it over and over again and engage, right? And so it's there's a lot of factors there. And so for me, sunscreen, I felt like there were lots of problems with the ones that I had almost bought or maybe had tried. The consistency, this whole concept of unscented versus a tropical coconut smell, which I'm allergic to coconut. So for me, I was always a little bit paranoid. And then the other piece of it was that these products that were available at dermatology offices, that I actually did like the consistency, and in some cases did like some of the smells. They didn't smell too bad, but they were expensive. They were like $70 a bottle. And I thought, in order to get quality products, do you have to spend for your own health? Do you have to spend $70? I mean, even if you can afford it, I just thought it's crazy. And there's a lot of people who need to wear sunscreen that don't, because the price gets in the way. So I did what every great entrepreneur would do. I bought all the ingredients and I went back to my kitchen and I started playing around with it, not to actually buy or not to actually launch a product for Hint sunscreen at all, but instead because my curiosity was there and I wanted to create something that I wanted to have, and maybe I would just continue making sunscreen in my kitchen if I really liked it enough. And that's when a friend who had been in the beauty industry was over, and she said, you have to get this approved through the FDA, and you have to apply, and it's this different division. And so I started going online and looking, and they needed a name for the company. And of course I didn't have a name because that was not my intent. And so I put the name Hint in there. And then about a year later, we got the approval back that Hint sunscreen was available. And I thought, I wonder if people will even like it. So we had this direct to consumer channel. We literally launched it the next week to see whether or not consumers were interested. We had names of consumers, right, from our own purchasers. Yeah. So we didn't have to wait. We didn't have to meet with any buyers. We just launched it. And we said, hey, we weren't even prepared enough or wise enough to go out on the beach and spray it all over people. I mean, we basically just said, let's just see whether or not it works. So we sent out an email. Like 80% of the people who had purchased Hint in the last 24 months bought a bottle of Hint sunscreen, which I thought was insane, right? I mean, it was crazy. They hadn't even tried the product. So that was the moment when I said, we have a brand that people trust, that they wanted to. We shared the story of what my why was, and people, it was $20 a bottle versus $70 a bottle, and people bought it. And I thought, wow. I mean, that's when I knew that I had a brand, when people would buy something just based on the fact that they loved the other product that they had purchased from us in a totally different category. And then the other piece of it, not related necessarily to when I knew I had a brand, but in terms of my purpose, I had believed when I finally said, okay, maybe I launch a sunscreen, maybe I put Hint on it. There was a few people in the beverage industry who said, what the heck is she, truly a tech executive, whatever, what is she doing? Anyway, and you'll always have people talk. You'll always have the haters out there. And then one of our customers wrote to me and said, somebody's ripping you guys off. They just, and they showed me a picture. It didn't look anything like our Hint sunscreen. But on the bottle, it said no oxybenzone. And I reached out to the customer and I said, so am I looking at the right bottle? And they said, yeah, but you were the first to put no oxybenzone on the bottles, at least the first that she had seen. And she said, and now there are sunscreen companies that are reformulating. and putting no oxybenzone on there. And I thought, if I can actually help our consumers, not only by developing great products under the Hint brand, but if I can actually nudge these large companies to do the right thing in the name of health and reformulate, because we're out there and we're marketing and sharing with people great sunscreen that doesn't have this ingredient, that's awesome, right? That's that I've served my purpose. And so that has continued to happen over and over again. And so, frankly, it's sort of another topic that I share in the book with entrepreneurs, is that sometimes, there's room for lots of people, especially when you're developing a category. If you start something just because somebody follows, just because somebody, has an ingredient that maybe you called out as something to remove, that doesn't mean that you can't survive. That doesn't mean that you can't be better. It just means that you are leading, and you are creating change and disrupting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, and for me, when you were talking, it's going from, I'll call it a challenger brand that's sitting into a sea of other sunscreens. You defined a niche, something that you could capitalize to differentiate yourself, and then all of a sudden they started chasing you. So you literally went from a challenger to a leader overnight. And I love that. That's fantastic. Because to me, it's about differentiation. It's looking for something that's unique and helps define the brand. And so you can really, separate yourself from the competition. So I thought that was really cool. If you could do it all over again, what would you do differently, if anything?
I think that the number one thing that I've learned, I've learned a lot in this journey, but I think that the number one thing that I spent a lot of time doing was really doubting myself, that I was capable of doing something like starting a company, and starting a new category, when I figured out a couple of months in that that's exactly what I was doing. I wanted to have the industry experts in, I would buy I would try and meet with anybody who had worked for these large companies, because they were going to wave their magic wand and solve all my problems. And what I've realized by talking to so many successful entrepreneurs is that the best ideas definitely come from outside of the industries, right? That people are typically trying to solve a problem for themselves or somebody that they care about, and where that actually they then realize that it could actually be something that lots of other people are interested in, and they don't have to be working in their industry. In fact, the lenses are actually clearer if you come from outside of the industry, if you're a consumer and you see this solving a need in some way. And so for me, the time I spent hiring industry experts or people that knew more than me versus actually, I always owned that I didn't really understand the industry, but I guess I felt a little skeptical whether or not I'd be able to figure it out. And I think that if you believe in yourself and believe that you're smart and believe that you're capable of doing things, it may take you a little longer to go and accomplish something, but it doesn't mean that you can't. And it doesn't mean that you won't. And in fact, maybe you'll actually do it a little bit differently and people will start following you. And, everything from not only creating a new category, but creating a new way to bottle the beverage without preservatives. When I came into this industry, everybody told me focus on retail. It's only in retail. Well, there were tech offices. That's kind of where we grew up. By the way, not SPINS data, right? So there were many people who said it doesn't matter because it's not on SPINS. And I mean, we made money. They bought product, right? We were able to kind of grow up. We had lots of influencers who then went and said to Whole Foods and Costco, you guys should really have this product because we would love to buy it. Just because it wasn't, being measured in some way didn't mean that it wasn't sales. Yet that was some of the stuff that we had heard from the industry early on. And then, of course, direct to consumer. I mean, the fact that, when we started direct to consumer years ago, I wanted to start it not to compete against Amazon or more than anything, I wanted to do it because I wanted to have that relationship with the consumer and be able to have that one-on-one research and dialogue. And I wanted the data versus having to go and
not get it from Amazon.
Not get it from Amazon, not get it from these retailers, because when I realized that they believed that once I sold them the product, that it was their customer. And so now, I mean, we sell about 50% of our business direct to consumer, another 50% through retailers. And, once you understand that it's their data and we have our data, we can all live in perfect harmony, right? It doesn't, I think what we've been able to navigate and what we've been able to do as a company too, is do something that I think many consumer products thought was impossible because they were worried about stepping on toes and worried about, you got to do retail or you got to go direct to consumer. And I think when you grow up and you're just trying to get sales and try and figure out where your customer is and how does your customer shop? And I think, looking at the last 17 months in particular, I think the thing that is most clear to me is that this consumer controls the destiny of how they shop.
Yeah,
and
I was going to say the digital transformation has just been unbelievable in the last 17 months, and in the shoppers now can get the data, get the information, control what they want to buy, where they want to buy, and they never have to actually leave their house. So there's so much in the change in dynamics and channels. And I think that's one of the things you're talking about is traditionally I got to be in the grocery store and I got to be in the liquor store or whatever it happens to be. That just doesn't have to happen anymore. And there's ways to reach consumers, and frankly, they like the convenience.
But they like going to the, I mean, our consumer who buys from us online, just as an example, also goes to Costco. They may not go to Costco every week. They go monthly. And if we are there and there's a variety pack that they could maybe not buy online, but it's the convenience and they still like retail. And so we know that our consumer who shops online doesn't just shop that way. They also go into other stores, and but it's their choice. And so if you're not servicing all these different channels, if you don't have an offering in all these different channels, then you risk the opportunity to, you're missing that consumer and how they're choosing to shop.
Yeah, I know my wife, I think she hits like 4 or 5 different grocery stores plus Costco. And then, we do stuff online as well. I know we're kind of coming down to the end here, and I appreciate you, giving me the time. There was something you mentioned in your book, and I had to chuckle a little bit because I experienced this, and that is I work with my wife. Not now, but I worked with my wife we've been married 31 years. We probably worked together for 21 of them through either our ad agencies or consulting businesses that we had. And the question I always got is, how do you work with your wife? I couldn't do that. Right. And so, through your book and kind of the evolution of your husband and how you guys started really working together. And I don't know if I dreamt it or was in the book, but it was like people asking you, how do you work with your husband? How do you work with your spouse? Right.
Yeah. And I think it was an accidental decision as well. I think that more than anything, he saw that I had this idea for a business, and he thought, he's the first person to say he thought it was crazy. He thought I had other opportunities. He wasn't quite sure why I was doing it, but he also felt like I was enjoying what I was doing. I was very curious. I thought I was solving, a problem, and who wouldn't want to see, any member of their family have that passion and interest and curiosity. And after, he was sort of keeping one ear to kind of what I was doing, he also saw me writing checks off of, our personal joint bank account. We live in California, right? So he was kind of like, wait, what are you doing? And he's a recovering, as he says, Silicon Valley tech attorney, intellectual property attorney. And so he why not? He started helping me deliver cases when I said, hey, what are you doing? Can you go take these down? I'll change an extra diaper if you do that. And so that's how it started. And then what he realized was what he really had interest in was the operations side. And so some of the stuff that I was bringing up as, specs, like the not having preservatives in the product, for example. He had, prior to going to law school, he actually worked in molecular biology research at Cornell in New York, at Cornell Hospital, and was very, very passionate and interested in sort of the science side of things, the why. And so he started, digging in, and also being an intellectual property attorney. I mean, it was kind of the way his mind worked, and he was very intrigued and interested. And so he would get on the calls with many of these bottlers that I was talking to. And what we realized is we had this like yin and yang. We not only had, children together and really, enjoyed each other's company, but one of the reasons that we really enjoyed each other was because we had different skill sets. And we had, this ability to appreciate each other's, here's where he comes in. And so this dog and pony show, we again didn't there was never any fight. Oh, talk to him, he's much better. Talk to her, she's, much more interested in that. Having said all of that, what I think that the beautiful thing is that it's allowed us over the years. He's our chief operating officer, and the interesting thing is that there have been days, especially raising a family of 4 kids, where I've had to jump in and do things, and kids have been sick or whatever, and I've had meetings that I wasn't able to go to, and he's been able to jump into those meetings, because I think being in the same house, we definitely know what's going on with each other. And as I share with people as well, the same is true. If I have to go to a plant and actually run our product or understand specs, I know enough about what's going on, but I'm also very, very confident that the way that he set it up is the way that it should be set up. So I think it doesn't work for everybody, but where it does work in our house is being able to have a focus of 2 things: our family and our business. To me, it almost seems easier when I hear people talk about multiple executives, multiple families, very complicated. For us, it's actually really simple. It's our family and it's our business, and this is what we do. And it's I think if we were both both finance people and we were starting a company, maybe, we'd have a difference of opinions about stuff, but it's very clear that we respect each other's what we're really good at. And we believe that each other is really good at things that maybe we're not as interested in. Or it's not that we can't do those things either. I think that that's the other thing that, when I hear entrepreneurs say, oh, I don't know anything about that, you should talk to them, I think that's not really the right answer either. That you have to learn all the different aspects about a business. You can't not understand, direct to consumer and all these things that could cost you a lot of money and get you in a lot of trouble if you don't really understand all the different aspects of it. So, but it's been a lot of fun. We just had 26 years, celebrated 26 years, 3 in college, 1 in high school.
That's great. Congrats.
Trying to help them find what they want to do when they grow up and find their passion. But I think also we've created a house where I think we're raising kids who I think if nothing else, they believe that if they have a dream, if things seem hard, they just have to figure out the steps. And if things don't work out the way that they thought, then they have to figure out why. And they have to keep moving and doing things. Nothing is too hard if you just figure out steps and you figure out how to take it on.
Yeah. It's very reflective of ours. With 3 older children, they're out in the workforce now, but they watched us as entrepreneurs grow a business and have the opportunity to sell a business, but they watched all of that, and they're all off doing their thing, and a couple of them are extremely entrepreneurial. And
I love it.
So yeah, so they're not afraid of it because they've seen it, they understand it. So I have one last question, and then we'll part company here. I hate to do it. I got a lot of questions, but I got one more I'm going to ask you. What inspires you every morning? What inspires you to get out of bed and do it?
I think just, and this has almost been full circle for me, because you asked me a question earlier about, what I didn't know early on. And I think having that relationship with the consumer, even from day one of getting the product on the shelf and hearing from first customer who wrote to us, said, "Oh, I love this product. I've been looking for a water that doesn't have sweeteners in it." There's this energy and this fulfillment that you get from having feedback from a consumer that they like what you're doing. And I think it's fascinating to me that you can develop a product or a service and you can hear from somebody that doesn't know who you are personally, right? But they just like what you did for them. And I think that is what gets me up in the morning, is developing great products that get people healthy, that inspire people to know that they can, right? They can get healthy. They can get through type 2 diabetes. They can get through cancer. They can go out and start a company without having, the right background or the right training. So that is really, my mission and purpose as an individual, is to be able to show people what they can do. And I feel that I've done that, not just with Hint products, but now with the book, and it's that's what gets me up in the morning.
All right. Well, fantastic. Kara, this has been great. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Like I say, I have lots of other questions, but maybe another time. Why don't you tell the listeners where they could buy the book, your website, any kind of information that you want to impart, and let them know especially where they can buy Hint. I'm encouraging it for sure.
Yeah, Drink Hint or Amazon or any store pretty much has Hint products, and the book is on Amazon and lots of bookstores. It's called Undaunted: Overcoming Doubts and Doubters, and really about the journey of building something that is pretty special. So I'm really happy to share it.
Yeah, real quick, are you doing dog toys too? Because I know you kind of sent me a little care package, and I actually, my son has 2 dogs, and I gave him the dog toy.
Oh yeah.
And the dog's been walking around with. They tell me he won't let it go. I think I sent a picture to your assistant. It's very cute, and they love it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's as somebody said, I saw one of our early investors the other day, and he said, I have to tell you, and you guys might have the best swag of any company where, and again, I'm such a dog person. I've got my picture of Sadie up here on the wall, and she podcasts with me every day. She's over here laying on her dog bed. And so when I had an opportunity to create the bottles, we've received so many pictures from consumers who have shared that the dog runs around with a Hint bottle in their mouth. And I thought, well, let's make it a little softer and much more fun. So that's what we did.
That's great. And you have a podcast. Why don't you tell the audience about that?
Yeah. So I have a podcast. It's called the Kara Goldin Show. It's on every Monday and Wednesday on Apple as well as Spotify. And my focus is really sharing the journeys of other founders and CEOs. There are always incredible stories on there, stories of challenges and learnings along the way, and typically from incredible brands, where people have, so often, I think until you actually know the backstory, you think that, it's a perfect brand, no challenges, no struggles along the way, and learnings that have happened. So it's typically, 30 to 40 minutes of really hearing people's journey. And it's kind of my gift to listeners, but also my gift to other entrepreneurs and CEOs who are really doing great things out there. So it's been a lot of fun building that as well. It's been 3.5 years. It's hit number 1 trending podcast in entrepreneurship and how-to education, and so it's been a lot of fun building it.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, podcasting is interesting, and it is a journey for sure. About 145 shows in so far, and it's been a lot of fun. And like you, I do guesting, and so it's been fun to do that. And I have to say, are your commercials, are they relatively new? Because I don't remember, and maybe more awareness, obviously, because I knew we were going to talk, but I noticed the TV and the radio spots now.
Yeah, we have radio going and television going, and it's interesting. Most of those ads, while they're branding, they actually send consumers to drinkhint.com, which is where you can order product. But we know plenty of people who see the ads go to Costco or their local supermarket and buy the product, and that's great too. So I think it's we've really found a way to kind of get to the consumer, and as I said earlier, it's really about the consumer makes the choice where they shop.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Thank you again so much. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to drinking more Hint.
Thank you so much. And please, everybody, reach out to me and let me know what you think of Hint, and if you get a chance to read the book as well.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll put a link to the Amazon in the show notes, so hopefully people will click and go buy some books.
Perfect. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you.
Kara, I want to thank you again for joining me here at the Business Growth Café today. What a great conversation. I really enjoyed the opportunity to get to meet you and to have this conversation. You took us on a journey. As I said, I loved your book, Undaunted. It's kind of the theme of the show. It took us on a tremendous journey, or took me on a journey as I was reading it, and we had the opportunity to do that today as well. I encourage you listeners, if you've not read the book, please do so. And if you've not tried Hint Water, I encourage you to do that as well. I think you're going to really enjoy it, as I have and my family has. I appreciate you listening in today. And if you're a new subscriber, thank you very much. If you're new to the show, thank you for that as well. I encourage you to become a subscriber, or at least add us to your podcast listening favorite, so you can get alerted every time we have a new show. And also from the great content that you get to benefit from. Either you're here because you enjoy the stories, or you're here because you're looking for business advice on how it can help your business. And all of my guests help provide those kinds of insights for you to learn. So I hope you'll join me here next week at the Business Growth Café. Enjoy your week.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion at the Business Growth Café with your host, Angelo Ponzi. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast and visit our website at www.businessgrowthcafe.com. Read Angelo Ponzi's blogs at www.theponzigroup.com.